So a few years ago when I was watching YouTube, a new video popped up titled something like "The Greatest Living Fantasy Author. It's Not Who You Think." So immediately my interest was piqued and I had to go watch this video. Now, I think I'd already subscribed to Bridger's channel, The Library Ladder, so I already knew the quality of his work and I was really enthusiastic to see who he was going to pick. The obvious choices would be kind of the big names, the bestsellers, maybe George R.R. Martin or Brandon Sanderson. But then when I was thinking about the subtitle, "It's Not Who You Think," I was thinking, well, maybe it'll be Robin Hobb, maybe it'll be Steven Erikson, someone like that. I was shocked when Bridger revealed in that video the greatest living fantasy author. His selection was Guy Gavriel Kay. I was shocked because I had never heard of Guy Gavriel Kay. So immediately I went to a Discord, one of the Discords that I would just frequent at that time, and I said, hey, has everyone seen Library Ladder's video? And also, who's Guy Gavriel Kay? And the first responder to my post said, hey, go check out Jake Bishop's channel because he has some really great Guy Gavriel Kay content. He's been talking about this guy for years. So I did, and those two influences caused me to start reading this author who has become perhaps my favorite author, period. So as a milestone, when I finished reading everything by Guy Gavriel Kay, I had two things I wanted to do in mind. I wanted to put together a reader's guide, which I did that a few weeks ago. And then I wanted to sit down with Bridger and Jake, kind of the two guides and the two guys that really brought me into reading this author the most, and to do something together. So what we've done is we've come up with a collaborative tier ranking of all the works of Guy Gavriel Kay. We sat down on a Zoom call and we just talked about each book, bartered, didn't quite argue because we agreed with most of them, and placed them together. So in many ways, this is quite a definitive ranking of Guy Gavriel Kay's works. Most rankings you get, it's just one person. This way, it's a little bit more definitive since there are three of us. I was going to originally kind of chop up this video and make it like a kind of a tight, highly edited video, but I didn't do that because I think the discussion was quite great. It was really good, and I just figured I'd share it all with you. There is one big cut in the middle where Jake lost power, but anyway, I hope that you enjoy this video. If you enjoy it half as much as I enjoyed talking with Bridger and Jake about Guy Gavriel Kay, I know that you'll enjoy it. And if you like the ranking, let us know. And if you disagree, I'm sure we'd love to hear your thoughts on the works of Guy Gavriel Kay. All right, well, hello everybody. We are here to come to a consensus of the ranking of the books of Guy Gavriel Kay. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to start and I'm going to talk about each book for under a minute, and then I'm going to put it on the tier list. And then Jake or Bridger will jump in and they'll either confirm my placement or disagree with my placement. And then after all three of us have gone through it, we'll come to a little consensus of where it is on the tier list. I think it'll be easy starting out when there's only a few of them, but when we start comparing these great books to each other, it may be a little bit more challenging as we go along. So the 16 books start with publication order. We're going to start with The Summer Tree. And The Summer Tree, in my opinion, is Kay's weakest book. It is his debut, so he gets one. I think that he kind of finds his legs through the book, though. The first half for me is kind of, I don't want to say it's a jumbled mess, but it is really disjunct and it's not very focused narrative. But by the third part, the story's told in 4 parts. By the third part, the story slowed down and it kind of focused on one character and one part of this world. And I thought it got really good. And even though I didn't love the actual ending of The Summer Tree, I feel like Kay had laid the groundwork for kind of a good series at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and put The Summer Tree on the tier list here. So we have, I should mention the tiers first, but best of the best, outstanding, good to great, mid, or skip it. You can guarantee that a couple of these tiers probably won't be used. I'm going to put The Summer Tree in the good to great tier. Probably more on the good side than the great side.
And what you have to remember of this entire video is that Bridger's voice is a lot smoother and has a lot more gravitas than me, but his opinion does actually count the same. You're gonna have an instinct to count his opinion more, but we just try and suppress that initial urge, okay? Um, I'd put it in the same tier. It's one of the ones where it's kind of like you glance at the mid tier, and then you're like, no, you do deserve better. We're just the field of competition is too high. Actually, I think I've gotten lower on the summer tier. I remember when I first read it, I was kind of like, I'm having a good time. There's clear flaws. Like there's things about it where you're just like, this is a debut novel, and then there's moments where you're just like, oh, so this guy's like a genius, and it's a very weird mix where it's like genius. Wait, these people are ignoring the fact that they lived in Toronto 5 minutes ago. Genius. What is going on? But I still think it's good.
Okay.
All right, my turn. I agree with everything you both said. I would put it in the good tier. It's probably the only K novel that I would actually rank as low as just good. All of the others are very good. In my earlier videos, I've said, well, he's never written anything less than very good, but that's because I was defining the Fionavar Tapestry as a single novel, all three of the books in the trilogy as one, rather than breaking them out. And I completely agree. The first half of the book is a mess and really shows his growing pains as a writer since he was just starting. But it gets considerably better as the book goes on and actually ends on a pretty dark note, which is a kind of a cliffhanger for the next two books that really get, they're a lot more enjoyable than the first one. So don't be put off if in reading The Summer Tree, you're going, how is this guy the greatest living fantasy author? This is not good writing. And that's right, you're absolutely right. This was not him at his best at all. So he was still learning the craft, but trust us, it gets better as it goes along. And there's also, part of the problem I have with The Summer Tree is there's an element of Fionavar, which is the multiverse aspect of it. And I don't want to go any much farther than that because there's an element of spoiler in it, but really all of Kay's works are linked in a kind of multiverse, and Fionavar is at the center of that multiverse. Now, you don't really see those links in all of his other novels. I mean, there are a couple of very tiny glimpses of them, of that, but there's this idea that the characters, the main characters who come from our world and are go into this portal world of Fionavar, that somehow, as Jake mentioned, they become incredibly competent all of a sudden. And you're going, how on earth did they learn how to do that when they've never done that before in Toronto? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't become a little clearer until later in the trilogy that those characters are sort of echoes of other characters in other dimensions of the multiverse. That they are, they're able to sort of absorb some of those skills and abilities and knowledge that they otherwise would not have had. And the fact that that's not clearer early on can be very confusing. But if that helps without providing much of a spoiler, I don't think, that's one way to put it in context.
Okay, well, we started off pretty easy. All right, so let's go to next one, which is The Wandering Fire. And that's the second book of the Fionavar Tapestry. And the learning curve was pretty steep because I thought this one got very good. It is a little bit darker, and you also see that Kay is not afraid to, how do I say it without spoilers? He's not afraid to kind of break a few eggs to make a good omelet. And I also felt that the one thing I really liked is that although this is traditional fantasy, I felt that in this book in particular, you really started to see kind of that Kay is leaning more on a kind of folklore type of tradition rather than like a Tolkien-derived tradition, which is kind of what was at play in the 1980s for the most part. And it got very good. And there's a very good tie-in that I don't even want to mention it. There's a really cool folklore type of tie-in that everybody knows. I don't know if it's a spoiler or not, but I'm gonna leave it out. But as for the tier of The Wandering Fire, I think it's going to be in the same tier. I think it's great. So still the good to great tier, but if we go left to right in terms of quality, I'm going to put Wandering Fire ahead of Summer Tree. I suspect you will both agree with this one, but what do we think? Let's go to Bridger next for this one.
No argument for me on anything you said. This is definitely a big step up from the Summer Tree. I suspect what you were alluding to but didn't want to specify is also something that I could have mentioned in one of my earlier videos, not GGK videos, and chose to leave out of that video. There definitely is a sort of a mythology reference that is a very intriguing one and plays a substantial role later in the trilogy.
Yeah, I would have it in the same tier. I do think it might be, when I was reading the Summer Tree, I might have been too generous relative to the other two. I think the gap for me between the Summer Tree and the rest of Fionavar is smaller than the rest of you. I think it's the most flawed. It also has my favorite chapter in the Fionavar Tapestry, which is like chapter 9 or whatever. I still like the Wandering Fire more. I would still put it in the good tier without thinking twice. But I do suspect the gap for me is just a little smaller. It is definitely, like, as a line-by-line writer, I think especially we're going to see it in The Darkest Road, he pretty clearly improves. This also might be slightly because it leans more and more into reference to some legends, and my knowledge of those legends, I suspect, is quite lacking compared to you. And I think sometimes it does rely on some knowledge of those legends for emotional beats that, if you know them, might have hit much harder. But for me, Summer Tree didn't rely on those really at all. And then the next two did more, so that didn't work for me as well, even though I think they are, from a quality perspective, better books. I still like it more than the Summer Tree, though.
Okay, all right. 2 books in, we're in pretty good agreement here. So, all right, let's go to the third book, which is Darkest Road, third book of the Fionavar Tapestry. And The Darkest Road, for me, just continued that progression. It was clearly the best book of the 3, and I think it's probably going to be the first one on the outstanding tier for me, because I really love the way this ended. I've mentioned it several times, but there's a huge scene towards the end of this book that Brandon Sanderson used in The Wheel of Time, and I loved seeing just kind of that scene is so epic, but seeing how Kay approaches it in a very understated and nuanced way just shows, even in his third book, just the maturity that he had and just the skill that he had as an author. But I love the ending of it. There are a couple aspects of the ending that I didn't love. There's a few things of some characters that all of a sudden are romantic interests that I felt came out of nowhere. But besides that, I thought that Kay really stuck the landing with The Darkest Road. And I feel is, for me, and maybe you'll disagree and we'll see, but I think it's the first one that I would put in the outstanding tier. Okay.
Jake, not Jake, I'm sorry. Josh, you're tracking me pretty closely here. I feel like a broken record. I'm saying, yes, I agree with everything you just said, and yes, I would put it in the outstanding tier, although for me it's at the bottom of the outstanding tier. But it is, again, significantly better than the book that came before it. I thought the ending was really strong, which is really a hallmark for Kay's writing, that there almost every one of his books, I'm struggling to think of a single book of his that doesn't have a strong ending. He really does a great job sort of fixing some of the problems from earlier in the trilogy, or at least patching over those flaws a bit and making it feel like a more organic story than it started out.
This is the first point of disagreement. I would firmly still have it in good to great. I think while reading it, I just have too many. Like, it definitely has more moments of genius than the other two, where, like, I'm reading it and I'm like, yeah, this is the same writer. Like, from a line-by-line standpoint, this is closer to the guy who wrote Tigana than the guy who wrote The Wandering Fire. But I just have too many points against it. And one is going back to what I kind of said before. I felt, as someone who is, like, you should not... It is cool to include references to other legends, but, like, I think it is a kind of a flaw of a novel if someone being less familiar with that makes them miss out on a number of emotional beats, which there are a bunch of scenes that I'm sure probably hit harder for you too, which I guess isn't really a thing for, like, the actual quality of the book, but it is going to affect people's enjoyment, and it affected mine to a reasonable, substantial degree. And I also think this book, like if you plot out the number of POV characters, I remember it shooting up, and he really pulls that off really well throughout his career. But I don't know if for me he had like the distinction in character voice. And so I remember like the main few characters, but I think there's like a pretty shocking number of POVs where like I look back and I'm like, really, that person had a point of view? Like I don't remember that much about them. The ending was very strong, except for the random romance stuff, and it had no one to read. But I like, yeah, I don't think I would have it in outstanding. Even though, like from a line by line basis, it's so strong. I just
Can I jump in and just
Yeah,
respond very briefly? I actually agree with what you're saying, Jake. And one of the criticisms I had 3.5 years ago in my earlier evaluation of Fionavar is that he crams too much folklore, too many myths and legends into Fionavar. That I think it overcrowds the story. And without, if he had given or narrowed that a little bit and allowed those stories and the folklore to breathe a little bit, I think it would have been better as a whole. But I thought that he did a good job of narrowing the focus a little bit in the third book. So some of those mythological and folklore and legends, that they aren't all trying to crowd for attention, and you just have a smaller subset, which streamlines the story a bit, which is sort of how he patches some of those earlier flaws. But your point is a really good one. I do agree with that.
Okay, so I think we have 2 out of 3 say outstanding, so we'll put it on the outstanding tier here and keep it there. All right, on to Tigana. So Tigana is probably the most famous work by Kay, at least the one with the most name recognition. And it seems to be a lot of places that people start with Kay. And in many ways, it is a starting point of his kind of quasi-historical novels. I said in my overview video that Kay himself has embraced that critics' description of his works as historical fiction with a quarter turn to the fantastical. But I say that Tigana is more of a half turn, because the whole concept of Tigana is magical in nature and has to do with these rival sorcerers. And I like that aspect of it. And I think he could have probably, even though he went further away from magic in most of his works after this, he could have continued kind of having more traditional fantasy elements in there. That said, I really like Tigana, but I don't think Tigana is top tier K. I think that Tigana is an outstanding book. I think some of the character development throughout it was fantastic. I really enjoyed some of the character arcs, but I don't think it's top tier K. So for me, what I'm going to do with Tigana is I'm going to go ahead and put it in the outstanding tier, but definitely above The Darkest Road.
Yeah, I feel very similarly about Tigana. Tigana, I joked to Josh before this, is like the attention hog of Guy Gavriel Kay, where it's of all the books I really love and think are outstanding, it's the one where like I kind of enjoy it when people don't like it, because I'm like, take that, Tigana, that's what you get for stealing the spotlight. That being said, it is like definitely outstanding in my opinion. It's a little rough around the edges at times, but the emotional strength of like just the story is outstanding. I think it has his strongest antagonist. I think the main antagonist of this novel is like a tippy top tier antagonist that you are going to read about in the fantasy genre. The writing, it's like we've reached the point where I can just open it to a random page and just be like, holy crap, he's built different. The ending was it was incredibly emotionally impactful. Yeah, it's easy outstanding for me. I know I was the person who didn't have Darkest Road and outstanding. It's really weird to me that these are in the same tier. We'll get back to it at the end and see if we still agree.
They may end up on very far ends of them by the end, though.
They are on opposite ends of the tier in my ranking. I think very highly of Tigana, but like you said, Jake, it has its flaws. I thought some of the characters are really well developed and some of the characters aren't. I think your point about the antagonist being a really, really good one is spot on. One of the things I love about Kay is that the good guys and the bad guys really are very complex. You know, the good guys have flaws, and the bad guys have good qualities. You know, they have admirable features and things that you want to feel sympathetic towards them about, even though they're the villains. And it's a much more realistic feeling story when you have characters of all stripes that you can find ways to identify with them, and they're not just caricatures of, you know, these paragons of virtue or these, you know, evil incarnate kinds of morally reprehensible characters. No, these are actually people who think they're doing the right thing, but maybe they really aren't. But their motives aren't really necessarily bad. They just are a little misguided in what their priorities are or how they're trying to go about things. So Tigana falls into that category of having really well-defined, well, in the sense of well-defined, complex protagonists and antagonists. And I definitely recommend it, but it's also definitely not where I'd start reading Kay, and definitely not among his very, very best. So, top of the outstanding, or very close to
Okay.
it.
All right. Solid agreement. But I'm sure, Jake, by the end, there will be a gap between those two. All right. Well, let's go on to, I mean, I'm going to be very predictable here because I think both of you and probably all the viewers that watch this know my love for A Song for Arbonne. It is my favorite novel of Kay's, and I think it does absolutely everything well. I think the characterization is great. The setting is vibrant and beautiful. It's well plotted. There are great action sequences. There are great interpersonal sequences. There are great intrigues, incredible secondary characters. And for me, I know it's personal, but I really connected with just the elevation in Arbonne, of the arts and music and poetry. And it spoke to me as a musician. And one thing I think about is when I was talking about Kay on Twitter one time, Janny Wirtz called his works lyric nostalgia. And I love that description. I think it's absolutely perfect. And for me, A Song for Arbonne played on my own nostalgia, thinking back to when I was a young musician and trying to make my way in the world. And it's a very personal book for me, personal love for me. I think we may agree right now where it is. I think the discussion later will be with you two whether or not it stays top best of the best. But for me, A Song for Arbonne is clear S tier. It's my favorite by Kay. We'll see how long it stays there based on our consensus here.
All right. No argument from me. It's one of the best. One of the things that, when I read Kay, that I've always gotten the feeling is that he writes in a way that almost makes you feel like his stories are part of the oral tradition of centuries ago. You know, and partly because he's setting his stories in these historical settings that where that was prominent. And A Song for Arbonne, that is a very, very, very prominent feature because some of the main characters are bards, you know, troubadours, jongleurs that travel around and tell stories and sing songs. And his writing captures an element of that. I mean, clearly it's not as lyrical, it's not as rhythmic, it's not, you know, as melodic as, you know, what the troubadours would have done centuries ago. But he does put a cadence to his writing that has a lot of variance to it, that really lends itself to, for example, with audiobook, listening to it, if you've got a good audiobook narrator who can really bring out that cadence, you really feel that, hey, I'm being told a story here. I'm not just reading a story. And A Song for Arbonne is one of the absolute best at doing that. It and I think A Bright and a Song to Go are two of the best that really feel to me like they're part of that oral tradition. So great novel.
Yeah, I think it'll end up being one because I think so I absolutely love A Song for Arbonne. It does all the things that, like, if I think of Guy Gavriel Kay being really good at, A Song for Arbonne absolutely has it. It has the element, even though it's a clear protagonist, every time you're reading about a character in the book, you feel like you know them well enough that they could have been the protagonists. They just didn't happen to be in the way this story is told because of a twist of fate. It's also one of those where I think some of Kay's book, Tigana, is a great example. Like, start really strong, and then like the middle's still good, but it's like a little less good, and then ends really strong. Arbonne, I think like every part is somehow better than the previous part. The order I read these in, I read Tigana first, and then Lions, and then I went in publication order because I was like, I'm going to read everything by the author. And this was the first like historical book that I had heard very little about at the time that I read it. So I didn't really know what to expect going into it. And on like page 11, I think I just commented on Discord, like, this is so obviously better than Fionavar. It's actually not even funny. Like, sorry, Fionavar, but like, you know, there are levels to this. Like, let's just be honest here. And it has me at a substantial disadvantage, and that's I don't care about the troubadours at all. I'm sorry. I read the songs, and people tell me they're good, and I'm like, I'm sure they are. But I feel no emotion when I read the songs. There's one that kind of does, and it's the you know, if there was a roll credits, if it was a movie, I'd be like, okay, that was kind of cool. And like, it's like, you'd think that people would be like, oh, you know, maybe like if you don't like the songs, I'm like, I didn't care about the songs at all, and this book still rules. So in terms of personal enjoyment, because of that, it might like border outstanding or best of the best for me. But like, I don't care. Just put it in best of the best. Like, I'm not gonna fight anyone on it.
All right, so there's where we are at this point. We're up to the Lions of Al-Rassan, which Lions was my first book, my first read by Kay, and I really enjoyed it, and set me on this path of reading everything else. For me, the thing that really stood out about this is I loved how, in many ways, he kind of personified the setting with characters, because this is the first book that's kind of in the Sarantine world, and a big portion of this world is the three religions, and he almost gives you three very important characters that almost personify these religions as being part of that religion, and then those religions, and then they're part of this incredible found family. It has one of the most unique and incredible endings. The way that he treats the climax of the story and the falling action is one of those, when I read it, I was kind of aghast. I couldn't believe that this is how he did this. And then I got through it and I said, yeah, like 99% of authors would not have done that, but this is better. They should. Just the way that he executed the ending was just incredible. And I love how he used a couple literary tricks in here where oftentimes he kind of hid the narrative where you were wondering who someone was or what was happening. And I loved how he did that, because it never felt like a trick, even though it is kind of a literary trick. It just felt organic to the storytelling. But Lions is for me another one that's clear S tier. It's not for me at the level of Arbonne, which, well, you'll hear me say none of them are for me. But I think it's a clear S tier. I think it's best of the best, and it's the one that I generally point to as kind of the best entry point for me.
Yeah, Lions is one of my favorite novels of all time. It's also one of the ones that I think about the most of any of Guy Gavriel Kay books. I think if I had to pick like a singular if it's like you don't get an entire adaptation, you just get one scene gets adapted perfectly. Like the imagery of Lions of like, it would actually be so hard to adapt because there's so many just scenes in that book where the imagery is so insanely strong that if it's not perfect, it would bother me irrationally. Incredibly strong cast of main characters, and like just such a unique way of bringing it all together, where it almost has a sense in the middle of like you're not really sure where the story is going to some degree, but then it comes together in a way where it just feels so inevitable. This is my favorite of the ones we've gotten to so far. Even though I would even give Arbonne consistency in the middle. I think the middle of Arbonne is stronger than the middle of Lions, but the Lions has like, if I'm making my favorite Guy Gavriel Kay start and favorite end, it contends for both. Man, the start is so good too, with like our three main characters coming together and the day of the Kay is so good at just starting you with an event Like, he doesn't start you with like, let's introduce the characters. He just gives you like, here's an event happening, and then it like propels the narrative and introduces it at the same time. It's delicious. So yeah, top tier. Yeah.
Which is true for everything except Summer Tree, where the introduction to the characters is really bad.
Yeah,
but otherwise, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. We don't talk about Summer Tree, even though we literally did.
I love Lions. It's my top of the top tier. It's not a, well, it's close to a perfect book for me. Very strong opening, very strong closing. I'm torn though with recommending it because it is the first book in sort of this shared world that a half dozen of the books are in, or maybe more at this point. I guess 7 books now with Written on the Wind, I think. Or am I miscounting? Something like
that.
It's anyway,
8. Yeah, it's 8.
It's 8 now. I've lost count. But it's the first one that he wrote, and so he had to do more of the heavy lifting of world building and the setting and the cultures and the religions, and he does it so well that it's amazing how rich and full the world feels in a single volume. He didn't need a trilogy to create this world. He created an incredibly compelling story involving incredibly compelling characters and an incredibly compelling world in a single volume. The efficiency of his storytelling combined with the lyricism of it, which normally you think, well, lyricism means wordy, so that adds bulk to it. And it's not. It's very efficient, but just beautiful, elegant prose. And I absolutely adore the ending of this book. It is one of the, if not the best of his endings, one of the best. But I'm torn with recommending it because as an entry point for Kay, I really don't like recommending starting at the top. Because from that point on, you feel a little bit disappointed. And I want to recommend people start at the really, really good stuff so they don't get disappointed at the start. But I don't want to start with the best because then you don't really feel like you've experienced Kay maybe as well as it should have been. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it.
I'm on team. He has too many good, but ridiculously good books for that to be a problem. And like, I think if you polled everyone who'd read every or most of the Guy Gavriel Kay books, this one might end up averaging out the top spot. But there'd be like 6 books that are super close. So I think if you're gonna have that worry for this one, you kind of have to have this worry for like 6 books. So then it's like you have to recommend like the 7th best book, and then it's like that feels weird. So I don't know. I just like don't worry about it. I mean, it's not my favorite. There's 2 that I like distinctly more than the Lions of Al-Rassan, which is crazy because it's unbelievably good.
Right.
But
so am I hearing the consensus is we're going to put Lions ahead of Arbonne?
I would have it above Arbonne. I think Bridger goes. I think yes. Bridger. It depends what day you ask him, right?
At the moment, no. I'm pretty solid on Lions above Arbonne, but my top tier has shifted a little bit over the last 3.5 years. But so far, we're good.
Okay, I'm Lions. Okay. I'm on Team Lions.
All right. Well, then the next one I think will be. I think there's some question which tier for the next one because it's half of a story, and that's Sailing to Sarantine, the first half of the Sarantine Mosaic. The thing about it's hard to talk about just the first book, but I'm trying to just think about the first book. I love how the story starts because knowing where it ends, there's kind of a circular nature to the story with at least a couple of the characters. I don't know. I don't think I can put Sailing to Sarantine top tier because it's only half the story. It's very, very good, and I love Sarantine Mosaic. If I ever do a top 10, if I update my top 10 favorite book series video again, it's definitely going to bump something out. But I think Sailing to Sarantine, only because it's the first half of the story. For me, I'm just going to put it on the outstanding tier. I think that there's some incredibly memorable scenes. You get some incredibly memorable characters, but I'm just going to put it definitely above Tigana for me. but not quite S tier. But I'll be talking S tier very quickly on the next book. So who are we up to? I think we're on Bridger.
Yeah, I agree. It's a setup novel. I mean, it's the first half, as you said. For me, you can't really have that top tier ranking without a concluding payoff to the story. And Sailing to Sarantium doesn't have that because, well, I mean, structurally, it's not designed to have that. It's still outstanding. I still think it's excellent. I mean, it has some really, really great characterization, great scenes, but the emotional heft isn't there because things haven't happened yet to create kind of that emotional payoff, which is the hallmark or one of the hallmarks of Kay's writing. So, you know, if we separate the books like this, definitely Sailing to Sarantium would be on the, you know, second tier for me. If we were to combine them and treat it as a single novel, it and the second one, I'd bump it up. It would the total duology would be on the top tier.
So I would actually put it below Tigana, and that might surprise people. I would love to stand here and claim that I like Sailing to Sarantium more than Tigana, because I think it has a superior artistic vision. I think it's more unique. I think overall, it's probably took more skill to create Sailing to Sarantium, but it is the setup book. A lot of the emotional payoff of that skill went into Lord of Emperors, which we're going to talk about shortly. I still think it's amazing. I think every single chapter of this book is at least very good. Go find me whatever you think the worst chapter of Sailing to Sarantium is. That chapter's really good. And I do think it kind of has a vision as its own book that I'm starting to see more as like starting in this city and like going through the wilderness and getting to the city again. But it does not have emotional payoff to the same degree. So I couldn't say that while reading it, it invoked as strong of a reaction as scenes in Tigana, even though there's less that I could point to where, you know, if you went back and it was like, hey, do you think like it would be harder to change to improve than Tigana? But I think as a solo book, just the emotional impact of Tigana is greater in my opinion. Yeah, I think firmly outstanding tier. It's still weird to have it on the same tier as The Darkest Road, by the way. Whatever.
I agree with you, Jake. It belongs below Tigana.
Okay.
For the very reasons you said.
And that separates Tigana and Darkest Road a little bit better. It's there too.
See, people,
all right.
Bridger agrees with me. This gives me credibility because of the gravitas and smoothness of his voice.
All right, on to Lord of Emperors. Lord of Emperors is one of Kay's best. I mean, it's hard to say which book has the best Kay ending, but I think Lord of Emperors was the most emotionally moving one for me. And I loved how, for a couple of the characters, it kind of came full circle, and you get this incredible moment at the end where you realized just what they've gone through. And I thought it was just drawn together so beautifully. But Sarantine Mosaic as a whole, it's a really remarkable story because just the perspective of the story, it's this huge event, and you barely get the perspective of the people that the history books write about. You just get the perspective of all these small players. And at the heart of it, of course, with both books is this mosaicist. And I mean, how many fantasy stories have a mosaicist, or even would consider a mosaicist as the main central protagonist, and that could have the skill to make it work? As far as ranking, for me, it's a little tougher because you have my top two backwards. But if I'm going to look at it this way, I think Lord of Emperors, I put Lord of Emperors above Lions. So I'm going to look at it that way. I mean, for me, the top three here would be Arbonne, Emperors, and Lion. But just looking at our collective and what we've come up with, I think I want to put Lord of Emperors above Lions. So let's see, because I'm sure we're all going to be top tier with this one. Let's see where it ends up.
So on any given day, I can flip a coin, and if it's tails, Lord of Emperors is my favorite book of all time. I think every single page is its own distinct work of art worthy of praise. I just cannot emphasize how insane. This is the one I've thought about the most, where when I read it, it was my favorite K book, and I think it's improved the most over time. It doesn't even make sense. And it proves that it can do it while setting things up, because it starts with a completely new character that we've never seen before. And chapter 1 is incredible. Like, it's so good. It has a chariot race that is legitimately like, I just read it and I'm like, well, this can't get any better. And then somehow it keeps getting better. It is the one that got me the most emotionally invested in the artwork that he's exploring. He explores a lot of artists, and it probably had the hardest job because, like, mosaics. And now, like, every single time I'm in a fantasy or sci-fi book and someone's like, you know, there's some mosaics across the roof, I'm like, oh, who made those mosaics? What are they depicting? What is their vision? Tell me. I need to know. The political intrigue. Like, the most impressive part to me about this series is also, this is the most sprawling cast of characters. It's the most POV hoppy, I think. It's the least linear, and it doesn't have a character list at the start. And at no point during this entire series did I get to a point of view and think to myself, I don't know who this person is. I don't know what their relationship is with these other characters. Yeah, I think it's just absurdly, ridiculously good. And it's pretty comfortably, like, even with the competition, it's pretty comfortably my favorite. And I think it always will be.
My opinion has actually changed a little bit over the last few years. So 3.5 years ago, Lions and Lord of Emperors, they were in a neck and neck race for my absolute favorite, the top of the top tier. Lord of Emperors has dropped a little bit since then. And that's partly because I did a reread of it last year when we did a...
Yeah, but you did it on audio and didn't like the audiobook, so it's invalid.
No. Well, it's more structurally the story. I mean, it is absolutely a phenomenal story. So it's still top tier for me. It's just where in the top tier it falls. It has dropped a little bit. The fact that the climax of the novel, of the whole combined novel, happens fairly early in Lord of Emperors. I mean, maybe around the halfway point. So you have half of a good-sized novel that is really just wrapping things up. And I just felt like Kay extended it a little bit too much and was maybe trying to tie up too many. I mean, because there are a lot of characters and there is a lot of complexity, a lot of different aspects of political intrigue and cultural conflict and other things. And Kay seems to want to tie up all of those loose ends, which he does. And part of me on this reread last year, I just thought some of this wasn't necessary. It took me too far away from the kind of the core emotional piece of the story because not all of those loose ends were as emotionally impactful for me. I mean, I'm quibbling because it is an absolutely phenomenal book. So viewers, please don't think I'm saying this is not a good one to read. This is absolutely a fantastic book to read. You know, reading this duology, it is I highly recommend it. But it didn't land quite as strongly as it did when I had read it years ago, for the first time, and just thought, this is just amazing. And it's still amazing, just not quite as amazing for me on the reread. So I would actually put it at the bottom. It's the bottom of my top tier.
Okay, so let's see.
Now Josh has to do some math. He has to figure this out.
Yeah, right.
It's like he put it top tier, but he actually likes it less than Arbonne. I put it top tier easily, and Bridger put it below all three. Enjoy figuring this out, Josh.
Wow. So let's see.
Keep in mind, I don't think there's a huge difference between any of these in the top tier. They're all excellent.
True.
I mean, they're all just really,
I would make
really
a new tier, and I would call it Lord of Emperors tier.
I think I'm just going to keep it there. I think the mean is probably somewhat like this at this point, but we do have some more top tier coming up. So we'll see see how that changes. But yeah, that's an incredible tier anyway. All right, so next up is The Last Light of the Sun, Kay's Viking Tale. I wonder if this is considered so much lesser because of what preceded it. we had Arbonne, Lions, Sarantine Mosaic. I mean, some of the most remarkable fantasy stories ever, and this doesn't measure up to that. I think for me, the my biggest complaint with Last Light of the Sun, which if you don't know the book, those of you watching, it's kind of his Viking story. And for me, the issue was it took a long time for the kind of the plot to reveal itself where it was going. And then once I thought it got there, I thought it was great. I enjoyed the ending. One thing I did enjoy quite a bit in this one was his use of magic. And this is a Viking tale, and it's kind of British Isles, so you have a lot of fairy magic, which just felt really organic towards the setting. I liked how he explored that. But definitely, this isn't top tier K. For me, the biggest question, I think, is whether it's going to be kind of lower outstanding tier or higher good to great tier. Just trying to look down at the bottom to try to get good balance. I think it's I think if I look at the adjectives, I think it's a great book. I don't think it's an outstanding book. So I'm going to put it top of the good to great tier, and let's see what you guys think about this one.
I have, I guess, three criticisms, big criticisms of the book. It is a very good book. I do enjoy it. So again, put that in context. But this is one of those where Kay was experimenting with a lot of different POV, the sort of the structure of the story, and there are a lot of different POVs. And I just didn't feel a connection to most of the characters. In fact, probably almost all of the characters, to the same degree that I have felt a connection to characters in other Kay stories. I mean, Kay does such a great job in most of his stories in really getting you to feel for his characters, and I didn't really feel for his characters in this particular novel, which for me was a real shortcoming, because that's part of the reason why I really like his novels is that emotional payoff. And if I don't feel a connection to the story or to the characters, that payoff is going to be substantially diminished. The other problem I had with this novel is really not the fault of the novel itself or the fault of Kay. It's the fact that I read this novel after reading the first several volumes of Bernard Cornwell's Saxon Chronicles, which he actually wrote at the same time. So Last Light of the Sun was published in early 2004, and the first volume of the Saxon Chronicles, The Last Kingdom, was published like 6 months later. So Kay was first, but I read the Saxon Chronicles first. And for me, those were just so much better. I really liked the Viking tale, because it's really telling the same story, or not exactly the same, but many of the same characters. The Saxon Chronicles deals with Alfred the Great and the Danish invasion of England at the time, which is the analog in Last Light of the Sun. But the execution of those characters and the depth that Cornwell gives to those characters and the kind of the empathy that I felt for them was so much stronger than I felt for Kay's. And so just by comparison, Last Light of the Sun really suffered for me. And so I can't give it an outstanding. I can only say it's very good and well worth reading, but not nearly his best.
So if you line up like 100 Guy Gavriel Kay fans, I probably like Last Light of the Sun more than like 96 of them. I read this. This is the lowest rated one on Goodreads. Consensus kind of agrees with you on. Like, it's got like a 3.9. And I went into it a little worried because I just read All the Seas of the World. But I'd read it like before Brightness, because I was like, oh, it's a standalone. I was reading through Kay at the time that All the Seas came out. And if you go watch my first review, like, I'm way higher on All the Seas now, but I was pretty low on it. And then this was like the lowest rated one. And then I was on like chapter 2, and I was like, I don't get it. And I don't get like why it's really low rated. I thought it was pretty awesome. I think it has some of the best like supernatural stuff that he has with like the Fae. Like, there's still like I still can view images in my mind of that introduction. It's got like, I really love the resolution with the kind of like, let's say, unique familial relationship and how that ends. I thought that was such a strong conclusion. If I was going to criticize it, I'd be like, there's an unreasonable amount of blood eagles. Like that doesn't make sense. And you know, that person should have been concussed for longer. But like for me, I think if you know how like, you know, what you're going through at the time of experiencing a book affects a book. I think if you like randomize my circumstances of reading this in The Darkest Road, I like this more than The Darkest Road every single time. Like, so I'd have it in an outstanding tier. It's closer to Tigana for me than it is to The Darkest Road. That's how much I like Last Light. Like Tigana's better. But I mean, it's gonna go in good to great by consensus. But I would like it to be known for anyone watching that the consensus is not me. And on mine, I think there's a tier in between it and The Darkest Road.
Yeah, we had talked about the different tiers we might include here. So it looks like, yeah, consensus will keep it there. But yeah, there almost is a tier between outstanding and good to great. We talked about maybe switching the good to great.
Like just having good and great, but whatever.
But I think what we ultimately decided was to keep it like this, just to show that, yeah, there aren't many C-tier books or any C-tier books by Kay. So, okay, so we'll keep it there. Let's go on to Ysabel, which I know that I'm probably much higher than both of you on this one. I think my enjoyment of Ysabel hinges upon having just read the Fionavar Tapestry. And there are two characters from Fionavar that find their way into this story. And I think having just read that story and have their entire story, knowing their background, what they went through, knowing their capabilities and so forth, I thought lended a lot more weight to Ysabel, which was kind of this lower fantasy story. It's not perfect. I mean, some of the dialogue with the teenagers is beyond cringy. And there are aspects of it that aren't great, but I really enjoyed Ysabel. I fully expect you to overrule me here, but I'm going to put Ysabel in the outstanding tier, and I'm ready for that to be wrong. But I really enjoyed Ysabel. I will say, just as I wrap up my talk on Ysabel, is absolutely only read it after Fionavar, because I think it just does not have the same effect, the same weight to it if you don't know those two characters who become very prominent in the last half of that book.
Yeah, Ysabel's my least favorite Kay book. It has a couple things going against it. One might be unfair, and then some I'm like, okay, I think these are legitimate criticisms. The thing that might be unfair is that I'd already read like 10 other Kay books, and I was used to him having like a very archaic like voice with like a lot of gravitas, and then it's just like you have this protagonist, he's like, you know, I put on my Nikes and I went to take a picture of my Canon. I was like, who is this? So it's kind of like, I wonder if like, you know, if I just read it blindly, not knowing who wrote it, I might have like liked it more. That being said, I would have figured out it was Kay pretty quickly, but then I would have been like, what's going on? And then there's kind of two plots to this novel. There's like, hey, we're gonna go on a photography trip, and hey, there's this like really old grudge match between ancient beings. And like the photography trip was just like, I don't care. I'm sorry. Like, I just don't. There's a perfectly good multi-century long grudge match you can write about here. That's pretty awesome. And then yeah, some of the dialogue is just like, this is very overtly, like sometimes people will call something like this book felt YA-ish, and they actually just mean they like the writing less and they are using the word wrong. This is like very deliberately writing about the theme of being in the stage of life where you are at a stage where like you're kind of too old to be a kid, but you're kind of too young to be an adult. And I just didn't enjoy the thematic focus. I didn't enjoy the camera trip. I joke that this is like Kay trying to write a novel I didn't like, and he couldn't do it. Like he didn't succeed. But he came way closer than he ever has and hopefully ever will. I would like, this would be, I guess it's good. This would be like, I guess I'd sneak it in the bottom of good. I could almost put it in mid tier, which might be too harsh. Might be unfair, but
Well, I think I'm going to split the difference between you two. I like Ysabel, but like Jake said, it has some significant flaws. But some of it are only flaws because of my expectations as a reader going in and what I expect from a Kay novel, as Jake said. Kay actually wrote Ysabel as a YA novel. I mean, that was his intent because he had a teenage son at the time, and he has said in interviews that he wanted to write a novel for his son to read. You know, that would be suitable for, you know, himself and for his peers, and it doesn't all click. It just, again, aspects of the novel I think are very well done, and there's a really interesting connection to the Fionavar Tapestry, which I was not expecting when I read it. I didn't realize there was actually a connection when I first read Ysabel, and only when I got to that point in the novel and I went, oh, wait, now I sort of see what's going on here. and and it is a good connection. I think that strengthens Ysabel. And as you said, Josh, definitely do not read Ysabel first before Fionavar Tapestry. But having said that, it is definitely one of his weaker novels. I still consider it very good, but it's at the low end of very good. I do put it above Last Light of the Sun in my ranking, and I put it above Summer Tree, but it's pretty much below everything else, for me at least.
Okay, so Jake said almost mid. I think we split the difference. It's probably there.
Yeah, I think by consensus it's over the Summer Tree, below Wandering Fire. That's right. It was actually funny because I read Last Light before it, and Last Light I saw like I'd seen a lot of people have it like pretty low, and then I really loved it. I then went into Ysabel expecting the same thing to happen, but then it didn't. Which you kind of, I mean, you like Last Light more than I like Ysabel, but you kind of had
Yeah. Okay, all right. On to the one that I feel is Kay's most underrated book, and that's Under Heaven. And I think it's most underrated because, except for like you two guys, I don't hear anybody else talk about it, and they should, because I think Under Heaven is top tier Kay. I love the Eastern setting. I love the premise. This is one that I loved it when I read it, but it's one, like Bridger, you talked about how your thoughts since you did your first tier list have changed. And for me, Under Heaven is one of the first ones I read. I think it was the second one that I read. And I loved it, but the esteem has grown over time for me because I keep thinking about this, and I keep thinking about the central premise, which is so interesting, where this character is bestowed a gift that makes him really important. And like this gift, and it's such a unique thing, I don't even want to spoil that aspect of the story for anybody. And seeing him just kind of navigate a different strata of society than he would have. And you got great political intrigue, you get great action sequences here, but this is one of the more memorable stories that has stuck with me really well, a lot more than when we talk about the next one. Under Heaven just really, really stuck with me, and I think it's top tier. So I'm gonna put it. For me, it's not those other three, but I think it's underrated, and I think it's underread, and I think it's under talked about. So maybe some people will get to this one soon.
Yeah, you're not going to hear an argument from me. Under Heaven is insanely good. It's the same thing that Bridger said for Lions, where Kay was like, oh, it takes you an entire series to create like a ridiculously well-realized world. That's cute. I need one kind of mid-length fantasy book. Like, you know, it's fine. I do that. It's like I mentioned Lions is one of my favorite starts. This one is also in there'd be 4 books where I like, if I had to pick my favorite start to a Guy Gavriel Kay book, and it'd be Lions, Lord of Emperors, but Lord of Emperors is cheating in this one. And one more that we'll get to later. I think this kind of has like, some people read it and are kind of like, hey, the protagonist, like, I can't say that without spoilers. I said it on the we had a spoiler chat for it.
Yeah.
the dialogue and the political scheming, it's up there with Lord of Emperors as like some of the best political scheming that Kay has written. If you want to say that from a political scheming standpoint, that this is his best novel, I am not going to fight you on it at all. If you want to say in terms of world building and setting, this is his best novel, I'm not going to fight you on it at all. If you want to say it's the best start, I am not going to fight you on it at all. If this is your favorite Guy Gavriel Kay novel, I am not going to fight you on it at all. It is in the top tier for me. I probably like it more than Arbonne because I don't care about Troubadours. Sorry, Troubadours. I don't necessarily think it's better than Arbonne, but I think it's every bit as good. I think it has a case for the best Kay starting point on the basis of having no prerequisites and just being amazing and being, I think, a good representation of his style, both. Like, it's kind of in between. He kind of shifts in style throughout his career, and this, I think, is a good representation of everything from, like, Arbonne all the way to the new stuff. Two enthusiastic thumbs up.
Absolutely. This was a novel that I previously rated in my top tier, but I had it at the bottom of my top tier. And my estimation of it has changed for in much the same way yours has, Jake. I mean, it has, and Josh, it has grown on me over time that I think about this one and the scenes that I think about in this one have stayed with me more so than several of Kay's other books, and even some in the top tier. This is a novel that I would now put at rivaling Lions. For me, it's my number 2 in terms of real emotional impact, in terms of feeling like not only did I really enjoy the novel, but I actually learned things by reading about it. Even though it's fake history, but he does a lot of historical research when building his novels, and he takes real cultural practices and traditions and things, and this is an area of the world, in our world, that I have some knowledge of, but I don't have nearly as much depth as I had in other parts of our world. And so reading about a part of Chinese history that I wasn't particularly familiar with, and some of the Chinese customs and traditions, and the role of poetry and the reverence that the culture has for poetry at that time, and how poetry can be used very, very effectively for political purposes, was just a fascinating element to this story. And as you said, Jake, this has maybe the best opening scene, although there's another opening scene that I also really, really, really love. Two others that I really, really love. So for me, this is a superlative Kay novel, very much right at the very top of tier 1.
Now Josh has to figure out how that consensus ranks it among the others. Good luck.
I would put Lions above it, but I put it above everything else.
Yeah, for clear, I would have it in between Lions and Arbonne, and then I know Josh likes it less than all. You can put it wherever you want.
Yeah, I think putting it third here probably is the consensus, because both of you have it above Arbonne.
I'm a fan of that because that's actually just my exact ranking of the board.
Jake, you are the consensus.
Jake is mid, right? Is that what you're saying? You're the median.
I am only for best of the best. For the next two, my consensus disagrees with it the most of all of us. But for best of the best, it's just that is where I have it. We're gonna see. I'm gonna have one more book in best of the best. We'll see if it goes where I would put it. I don't think it will. I think it's gonna break the trend.
Okay. Well, up next we have River of Stars, which I mentioned that Under Heaven kind of grew on me and stuck with me, and River of Stars has kind of faded away except for the ending. The thing I remember River of Stars is kind of just to echo what I said about The Last Light of the Sun is I remember this story, I didn't know where it was going. It was just kind of meandering, and then it revealed itself into something, and then the ending was incredible. So I enjoyed the ending quite a bit. It's probably one of the ones I look forward to the reread most, because I feel that knowing where it ends and where it was actually going to go, I might appreciate it more. But for me, River of Stars, same setting as Under Heaven, and I think that was a benefit to it. But I think it's definitely hugely in its shadow. So let's see, where do I want to put River of Stars? I think it's great tier, maybe. Yeah. All right, that's where I'm going to put it. I'm curious what you guys will think about that one.
So River of Stars is in contention for, well, actually that's not true because Seize the World happened. If I didn't read all the Seize the World out of order the first time, River of Stars would be my most improved on reread. I haven't read all of them twice yet, but I have read this one. I remember I had a similar thought to you in that for a lot of the time in the book, I didn't really know where it was going. Like, it felt very, like, there was the main plot that was really good with Rendian, and there'd be sections that just didn't connect to it at all. And then I reread it, and I was like, I kind of feel like all this connects. This is weird. I would have it, I think, an outstanding tier. I think if, again, this would be, for me, it would be between, like, I would kind of have, like, the great tier where I would have it distinctly below Sailing to Sarantine and Tigana, but above Last Light of the Sun and Darkest Road. I mean, I wouldn't have Darkest Road in that tier at all, but whatever. I think it also has some pretty amazing political scheming. It just comes together so strongly. I think the main cast is very strong. It does have one scene that kind of relies on Under Heaven, but it does with like there's like a kind of court scene where something's revealed and made me very angry about a tree. But it does that very well. I would have it, kind of like it's kind of like, if I read this and then read a Fionavar book, I think any of them, I think I'm gonna have a pretty distinct gap between them. But I'm really curious to see what you see on reread, because I think if you ask me in between, like before I reread it, I probably would have had it at the top of very good. Anyway,
okay,
let's see what Bridger thinks.
I love this book, but I don't love it as much as Under Heaven. I don't love it as much as any of the books in the top tier. I would put it in the middle of outstanding, and pretty much as Jake put it, it does many things very, very well. There are characters that I really felt were very compelling. It has a great kind of climax at the end. I mean, all of the hallmarks of Kay are here. They just aren't quite as seamless, and he puts a few too many POVs in the story that I think complicate the story or dilute the impact of some of the character development in ways that Under Heaven doesn't quite. I mean, he definitely ramps up the POVs in River of Stars. But having said that, I really enjoy this book, and as I said, put it in the middle of outstanding, below Tigana, below Sailing to Sarantium.
But above everything else.
But above everything else.
Okay, that works for me.
How good is the blind Chancellor? Like the nearby. Oh, I love that character. He doesn't have that many scenes, but I love that guy. He's so cool.
All right, on to the loosely related trilogy of standalones, is I think how I've been saying it the last couple months. Children of Earth and Sky, one of my favorite protagonists in this one. And I do want to thank both of you for giving me the recommendation of reading Brightness first, because I do feel that helped from a, like, kind of what we've talked about with Under Heaven and River of Stars, as well as like Lions. I feel that there is a lot of establishment of the setting in Brightness that I think just adds more weight to both of the books that follow it, Children of Earth and Sky and All the Seas of the World. Children of Earth and Sky is one of the ones I've read this year. It's actually one of my maybe top books of the year. It's not top tier K, but I think it's a really strong novel. I'm going to put it above River of Stars on this ranking. Definitely, it's not up to those other two in my opinion, but I really love it, and it has not that. Oh, I didn't click that. I put it middle of the outstanding tier. And not that cover, but it does have my favorite book cover of all the other ones, the UK edition. All right. I don't remember who's up first. I think Bridger.
Okay. Just to clarify, I may have missed it. We are talking about Children of
Earth and Sky. Yes.
Sky.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, we're still talking publication order.
Not the chronological order.
Yes. Yes.
This is a great book. As you said, Josh, this is not where to start with this loosely linked trilogy. I mean, they are standalones. I agree with you, but there are some spoilery elements to the middle book, which actually is a prequel, Brightness Long Ago, that you don't really want to start with Children of Earth and Sky, I think. Although I did. When I read them in publication order, and only after reading them in publication order did I go, I really wish I had read them the other way. Having said that, Children of Earth and Sky has some absolutely outstanding political intrigue. It has some really compelling characters, male and female. There are you get to see more of some of the cultures that aren't really explored, but they're referenced in many other books in the Sarantine setting. Like you get to see the kind of more of the Asherite, which is the analog to the Muslim tradition and the culture in this novel that you don't really see in the others. Well, I guess you see it in Lions, but it's a different form of it in Lions, and a different time period as well, hundreds of years difference. So this is a complicated novel in that it has many different locations and a lot of different characters, and there's lots of political intrigue that mirrors what was going on in Italy and the Balkans and in the Ottoman Empire. That's hard to keep track of, I think, if you're not at least a little bit familiar with it. Although just a little brief read of Wikipedia pages for a few things can sort that out. I mean, without really spoiling much, because he's not copying history. He's just being inspired by some of the larger events, larger conflicts, and certain pivotal characters in history. But I very enjoyable. However, just an outstanding book, not top tier. And I would put it below River of Stars and above The Darkest Road.
We're back. So yeah, BC Hydro thinks that Children of Earth and Sky sucks. No redeeming qualities, but so it doesn't get a vote though. I didn't actually get to hear what they said about Children of Earth and Skies, so now they recapped it. I think it's a very good book. I think I'd almost have it top of very. So here's the thing I have. I like it more than The Darkest Road, but you guys like The Darkest Road more than me. I don't know if I like it more than you guys like The Darkest Road. So I'm fine with it being high, very good tier, or like great tier, or low, outstanding tier. It's one of the few I haven't reread, and it's kind of one of the ones I felt similar about to River Stars and kind of All the Seas of the World, and they both jumped up, so I'm kind of expecting it to jump up. So I think if we bell curve for my reread, I think outstanding makes sense.
Okay, so probably outstanding, and probably just consensus is probably right here.
I definitely like River of Stars more.
Yeah, so River Stars, both of you had that one slightly ahead, and I feel these are all very similar tiers for sure. So I think that's the correct place for it. Okay, all right, on to A Brightness Long Ago. When I finished A Brightness Long Ago, just to be concise, I just simply said that was beautiful. It's my number 2 favorite Kay novel. I'm going to put it top of the S tier. I think it's such a beautiful story. I think if there's I don't know if it's an entry point for people, but I just, the characterization was strong, the story was strong, and just, I loved everything about it. So Sorry, wrong button. I'm going to put it temporarily because you're probably going to overrule me. But Brightness for me it was my book of the year last year. It's my favorite except for Arbonne. So I'm going to kind of reorder our S tier here, at least temporarily, because I know Jake's up next and I know what his favorite is. So, but at least S tier. What do you think? What do you think of Brightness? Or do you have it?
So Brightness on Go is my second favorite Guy Gavriel Kay novel, and is quite generally my favorite standalone novel. It also is wild that it's as short as it is, because if you look at like how much I like the start of that compared to my other favorite start of novels, they often have like, you know, a few thousand pages of buildup. The first person narration just hits differently. Like the like reminiscing is absurdly good. It does, like, it's kind of nice to read it after Sarantine, but also if people want to start with Brightness, I think it's a perfectly good starting point. I think, like, you know, Kay line by line writing is always ridiculous. I think if I had to pick the point where his like prose was just peak, I think I might pick Brightness. This was one of the books where, you know, 30% in had a chance to be my favorite book ever. Usually if a book, like, I haven't read it, so technically it has a chance of my favorite book ever, and then that quickly plunges to 0 by like page 15. And here I was like, this might be the best thing I've ever read. In deciding what I like more between Lord of Emperors and this the first time through, I was like, well, I think the chariot race is a little cooler than the horse race. Yeah. But they're both awesome. Similar though, this is second for you, this is second for me, but if this is first, I don't care. Absurdly good novel. Oh, also, it's one of the ones that caused me actual physical pain. Like when I read something, I was like, oh, that is a physical sensation. That is like kind of concerning. So,
all right. So this is one of the books that has significantly changed for me in my assessment of it over the last few years. I previously had it near the top of my outstanding tier, just below Tigana, 3.5 years ago. But it has stuck with me, and the more I've thought about it, and it's now in my top tier. It is, as Jake, I completely agree with your statement, Jake, that I think this is his peak prose. The writing in this is so elegant, and he adds an element of profundity to the story, and just kind of the narration, where you have this character who's looking back on his life and reminiscing about things that happened, but injecting questions. Or there are these little interludes where it's really not part of the narration of this character. It's just, hey, here's this little secondary or tertiary character who has no real impact on the story, but let me spend a few paragraphs just describing this character, what they did, and the impact that this had on the history of the world going forward, looking ahead 100 years, 200 years. And so he injects these little snippets and asks questions that makes the reader think, okay, what is the answer to this question? So Kay isn't telling the reader, hey, here's this really profound thought that I have, unlike, say,
we don't need to
He's posing the question and letting the reader contemplate the profound sort of implications of what he's writing about. And he does it so well and so efficiently. And that's actually kind of my original criticism of the novels. I love this novel. This is a practically perfect novel. The pacing is just great.
Want more.
But I want more. I mean, that has always been my criticism, is I just wanted more of this story, which was why I kept it out of my top tier. But as I've ruminated on it, I realize he does a great job with what he actually put in this story. He's not really shortchanging the story. He's building a really tight compelling, exciting, emotionally impactful narrative that's also profound and elegant. And the horse race scene is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. I love that. I love the characters, strong female characters in this novel. So it's in my top tier. It's not at the very top, but I do have it above Lord of Emperors. I have Lord of Emperors at the bottom of my top tier, and Brightness Long Ago just above it. I also think Brightness Long Ago is an extremely good entry point for Kay because it's such a tight novel. It's an easy one to read, fast-paced, has one of the best 3 opening scenes, there's actually a series of scenes in the opening that kind of set the stage that I think are it's one of the very, very best of Kay's.
This is the other one
So
where it's like,
it gets the reader right in, and it doesn't really let go at any point in time in the story. So for someone who wants to really feel like they're having a lot of fun reading Kay for the first time, this is a great novel to do that.
especially if you like emotional damage, but that's all of them. So,
That's
I think
all
by
of them.
average ranking, that might be the highest.
I think so, because I think I have it above Lord of Emperors I think that's right.
And I'll even say, I like Lord of Emperors a little bit more, but I think Brightness might be has a pretty good case for being the most impressive on the basis that Lord of Emperors has an entire book of setup for it to then pay off. Brightness is just like, it doesn't need a book of setup. Imagine how good Brightness would be if you had an entire book to set things up. That might be break physics how good it would be.
All right, so what do we have? 2 left. Just looking at my stack here. All the Seas of the World is up next. So kind of echoes this something, Bridger, that you mentioned, that for me, when I got to Brightness, kind of that narrative voice that you were alluding to, for me, is what I've realized is maybe my absolute favorite thing about Kay is when he's weaving a story that he makes you feel like what you're reading is important. And I don't know many authors that have done that for me. A lot of times I read a book and I feel that I'm reading a great story, I'm reading a great book, but like I read some of these works of Kay and I feel like this is important that I'm reading this book. And I segue that into All the Seas of the World. Didn't feel like one of the most important books by Kay. I will say at the outset here for anybody watching, this has to be read after, or I don't know if there's ever a has to, but you're going to benefit from reading probably the other 2 before this one, at least Brightness, because it really is a sequel to Brightness. For me, the one thing that permeates this book is more in the subtext of something that happens off page. And I think having not lived in that world, you might not get the impact of this huge events of what happens to the Sarantine Empire. I still enjoyed it though. I think because I read it at the right time. But I think this one narratively is not one of Kay's best. I did like kind of the dual protagonists in this one pretty well. Where do I want to put it? I think the tiers would look nice and balanced if I put it at the top of Last Light of the Sun, great tier, because I don't know if it's outstanding. I think it's great, but I could be persuaded for outstanding. Actually, no, I'm going to put it outstanding. I'm going to put it just above Last Light of the Sun, outstanding tier, Darkest Road. I think that's probably where it belongs most for me.
So this would win my most improved on reread because I read it before Brightness. So I think there's kind of 2 ways you can look at this. You can make the case that its goal, like Kay expressly says that his goal is that you should be able to read them in any order. And I don't think he succeeds at that. So if the goal of this is to be a standalone, I think it's a deeply flawed standalone with moments of being very good because the guy who wrote it is a genius. And it, like when I read it, it was of like my original scores. It would have been my second least favorite. But then I think it's a very good follow-up, like a very, very good follow-up for Brightness. And a lot of the scenes where I was kind of like, what are we doing here, was paying off and continuing on stuff that was in Brightness. It's still not among my favorite Guy Gavriel Kay books. I think it is like it does have a little bit less narrative momentum, where he has like the start that could give it narrative momentum, and then he's very good at then like running with that start. But it does, I feel, peter out a little bit. I enjoyed the like final act the second time quite a lot more. I found it like the main character's arc very personally satisfying. I kind of was on the same spot as you, where I was like, this feels like it's either I think I'd have it high, very good. Well, again, it's the thing of I think it's better than The Darkest Road, but I don't think I like it more than you two like The Darkest Road. So I think I would have it top of very good. Well, I actually like Last Light more, but again, I don't like it more.
Gotcha.
I think I like it more than the consensus of the three of us of Last Light of the Sun, but that's its own thing. This is getting convoluted.
I'm going to ask you, Josh, to reconsider your ranking. I think it belongs at the top of the good to great, sort of where Josh or where Jake put it. For me, this story felt less consequential. The characters, the plot itself. I mean, there are some really wonderful scenes, wonderful elements. The writing is beautiful, so it's still a great read. But I just didn't feel like I wasn't wowed by it. I didn't have the same emotional feels from it. And as I said, it didn't feel as consequential within the world that Kay has been creating throughout all of these novels set in this Sarantine universe. So I was a little disappointed by it. I still enjoyed it quite a bit. So it's at the top of my third tier there, that good to great tier. Just not quite outstanding.
Okay, so that seems consensus there. Which, I mean, I was there. I was waffling with it myself. So
Because like we all agree where to put it relatively. It's just we can't agree on where to draw the line between the. We didn't agree on where to draw the line between the tiers.
true.
Yeah, we haven't really defined what the tiers mean anyway. It's all semantics, right?
Yeah, right. All right, and that leads us to the latest book, Written on the Dark. So for me, I enjoyed this because for many, this is the first Kay novel I've read upon publication, because I've only been reading Kay for two and a half years at this point. So it was pretty exciting to me to read a new Kay novel when it came out. It's his slightest novel in many ways. It's the shortest one, I think, except for Summer Tree. Part of it, I think it is a kind of a focused novel. You could say it's pretty focused because you have a central protagonist, this rascally tavern poet, and I liked him, and we followed him for a great bulk of the story. The one thing that the story didn't do a lot of, though, it didn't do a lot of the little tangents. And I think of some of the tangents that Kay will take in a story as being some of the most memorable portions of a story. I think of a portion of Lord of Emperors where we had followed an assistant cook for several POVs, and then we finally got a POV for the cook for like 7 pages. And it's inconsequential, but it was incredible. It was so good. And Written on the Dark didn't have any of those, and I really missed them. That said, the epilogue was incredible. I thought the epilogue, in many ways, it probably played upon my own nostalgia for the previous books, because it did play heavily, especially on Sarantine Mosaic. But the other thing it also did is it kind of elevated the story of a couple of the secondary characters and gave them kind of an arc that I wouldn't have expected them to get an arc until we got to that. So I think it was kind of a mixed bag, to be honest. I did like the setting. This was the setting for me. I've realized in reading Kay that my knowledge in world history is lacking. But one country, for some reason, I've always gravitated to reading about is kind of, I've read a lot more kind of French history than any others. So like there's a memorable scene from the 100 Years' War that I recognized right away, and then he subverted my expectations there. So I enjoyed that aspect of it, and just some of the history was great. But Written on the Dark is, I called it, almost might be a coda to the Sarantine world. I mean, I'm going to put it in the good to great tier. I think it's probably, it's definitely above Wandering Fire. That's probably where I'm going to put it. Probably between Last Light of the Sun and Wandering Fire. But it's still, again, you see this as the lowest tier of Guy Gavriel Kay, but that means it's still a really, really good or great book of anybody else.
I agree. It's a very good read. Having said that, though, I was disappointed by it. It felt incomplete. It felt rushed. I mean, it was almost as if, I mean, this is the impression that I had, was that he was writing to meet a deadline. And he had more of the story that he wanted to tell, but hadn't quite finished those parts of the story. And so to meet deadline, he just excised parts of the story. I mean, there are time jumps in the story that felt very choppy to me. Like there really should be some bridging action or something going on that would flesh out the novel more. And I mean, I don't know if that was by design or if that was by necessity on his part to try to get the book out. But it really did not feel as cohesive as almost any other of his novels. For me, I mean, it felt choppy. Are there great characters and great scenes? And there are some really, really great, there's some great writing in it. It just didn't feel complete to me. And as a result, the emotional impact was far more limited for me than others. And I just read the book 2 weeks ago. And I'm really kind of shocked at how little of a lasting impact it has had on me. I can't remember all the plot details. Now, maybe I'm just getting old, but it's only been 2 weeks. And the scenes in that book, even the really good scenes, just didn't grip me the same way others have in other books of his. So for me, that's a disappointment. I still think it's very good. I have it, where is my list? I have it in that good to great, above Ysabel, above Last Light of the Sun, and above Summer Tree, but below the rest.
Okay. Yeah, so first I'm going to talk about this like as if I was comparing it to normal books, just because I think, you know, people, for these, it's like, oh, sound a little negative. So I'm just going to like pretend that I'm just comparing this to books generally. Yeah, Written on the Dark, really, really good book. It managed to have a real sense of tension coming down the close, where I could tell the author, you know, did a really good job of having me care about the main dynamics between the characters. So especially with it being a standalone and him kind of showing that he isn't willing to pull punches, like I honestly didn't know if it was going to end, like on what note it was going to end. And like it had me like legitimately like nervous as I was reading for the characters involved. It also has some very interesting history bending with this little thing that the author does where he goes to like the secondary world very strongly based on a historical setting. I think the strongest bit of the novel was kind of like a little tangent into a historical figure, and he changed history in a way that feels like it would be very like satisfying and wish fulfilling, but then doesn't let you get away with that and goes like, oh, here are the consequences. Oh, did you think about that one? And ended up being kind of like almost inspirational and tragic at the same time, which is a pretty impressive combination of beats to get. Also, the epilogue was incredibly strong and just very, very powerful written. Okay, that being said, it is again on the lower tier for my K books. Now I'm going to compare it to K. So I almost called the writing of this book like Glenn Cookian. Like it feels like writing style wise, it's a little like punchier and like choppier, which might have just been like a deliberate stylistic choice. So someone could like that more, and I guess they wouldn't be like wrong to like it. I think it just, you know, almost every Guy Gavriel Kay book has like multiple moments where like you're reading and I just read it and I'm just like, holy crap. Like, and I don't think I got many of those. Like there were some in the second half, but I think halfway in, I was like, I don't know if I like, this is a competent novel. I like everything. If I was trying to criticize it, I'm not like, hey, the characters are shallow or the plot doesn't make sense or anything like that. But I just hadn't gotten those moments. I do think the second half was substantially stronger than the first half for me. And the epilogue 100% is nostalgia reliant. God damn, that was some good nostalgia. So, which, like, you know, you can be nostalgia reliant and be bad. But it did really hit. So yeah, I would have it in the good to great tier as well. I'm pretty happy with where you guys have it. Yeah, I wouldn't move it at all from where you have it. I agree.
Okay, well, we'll make the consensus full screen here. And there it is. So we got 5 S tier, 5 A tier, 6 B tier. And there's our order. So that's the consensus from this three-headed monster of talking about Kay's books. So I just want to thank both of you for hanging out, and Jake dealing with a power outage, and just talking about this great author. And I do want to thank both of you for helping my journey through Kay's works. I first learned about Kay's works, Bridger, in your video about the greatest living fantasy author. I had not heard of this author at all. And I immediately went back to, if you remember the Grimoire Discord, I went to the Grimoire and I was like, hey guys, have you heard of this Guy Gavriel Kay author? Because I'd literally never heard of him. And like 3 people chimed in and said, hey, Jake Bishop has some great content. So I feel like both of you were guides for me in reading this book. So I just want to thank both of you for that, because Kay has probably become my favorite author. And it's been just great to read his books and talk about them. And I'm looking forward to rereading them again in the future. So thank you both. Thank you all that are watching. I'm not going to shoot an outro. I think this is good. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion, and put your favorite book by Guy Gavriel Kay in the comment section below. And if you have any disagreements with our 3-headed tier list here, let us know in the comment section below as well. Until next time, take care. We'll see you.